You all set?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. Hey, everybody. Very special podcast today. We're in the middle of our coronavirus, so instead of having a guest here in the studio, we're doing a guest via Zoom. And our very special guest today is Kate Farrar. But before we get to you, Kate, I just want to do a quick plug for our famous 60-second video, because this podcast is being brought to you by Direct Line Media. My name is Dave. So anyway, let's get to it. Kate, thank you for joining me today on our Zoom podcast event here. And we're going to do a little bit, I think I told you we're going to do a little bit shorter. It's going to be about 30 minutes.
Great.
Sometimes we ramble on and get to an hour, but just for technical reasons, we're going to cut it a little bit short today to 30 minutes. So you asked me what we're going to talk about, and we're going to touch on a couple of things. So the first I want to ask you is why did you decide to jump in to the 2020 race, and you're running for state representative of the 20th district? Is that right?
That is accurate.
Yeah. So why don't you give me a little bit of background on what made you jump in to do this? Obviously, you want to try to make some sort of a change, I'm guessing.
Well, it's a great question because it definitely is an adventure, and most people would say, "What's the reason behind it?" And it's a very good question to have. And what I would say, there's three key reasons for me. Number one is I think for me, in coming home to Connecticut, I actually grew up here. I went to school here at UConn, and then I left the state and I lived in Washington, D.C. for 11 years and moved home to West Hartford about 5 years ago. And one of the things I think that really stood out to me in moving home was really how essential it was that we really lead in new and bold ways in our state and really kind of chart a future that we want to see, especially around education, around families, around our human rights. And I just kind of saw that in a starker way in coming home. And secondly, I think, especially kind of in this moment that we're seeing of this public health crisis, my whole career has really been spent on addressing inequalities. I've definitely focused on that, particularly on women's rights. But I think one of the things you're seeing with our public health crisis is we do have these great inequalities, even in our state. And I am very driven and motivated in how can I make a difference in those particular things, especially in our district, which is a fabulous place to live. And we have incredible diversity, and that should be a strength that we really build upon. And finally, I would say, I really see the essential part of our democracy as being representative of its people. And in our state, we still have just a third women who are in the state legislature. And I have certainly encouraged other women to run and have trained other women to run for office, but it just felt like I needed to take my own advice in that regard and finally step up.
That's awesome. Going back a little bit to the equality part you're talking about. So down here on New Park Ave, where my office is and my studios and everything, there is an abundance of, I guess, homeless people, maybe. I don't know if they have a home or not. But there's a lot of panhandling going on. How is, in your opinion, how do you feel that this current health crisis is really affecting those folks that really don't maybe have a place to live, or they live in these crowded shelters, or they're in a tent somewhere? And I have no idea. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday or a couple days ago about this out on the West Coast, because it's a big problem out there.
They have a real big challenge there. Yeah.
How do you see how do we combat that? Because there's really been no talk about these poor folks who are out there with really no safeguard against anything.
Yeah, there actually was just an article, I think it was in the Current yesterday, about this particular need, because not only do you want to make sure that anyone who is on the streets has somewhere to go, but we need to make sure that our homeless shelters are not set up in a way that is kind of promoting infection. So one of the things that some of the homeless shelters are looking at right now are alternative locations in order to have enough space for individuals. I actually know down in New Haven, they've taken over another city building to start to really provide space for individuals. And that's the sort of, mechanisms we need to have in place because, as you said, individuals who have nowhere to go are especially more vulnerable to what they might not just kind of get exposed to, but then they are clearly exposing others in a much bigger way.
How can people help these folks? There's a lot of people, well, they should get a job and all that. And maybe for some that's possible, but I know definitely for a lot that's for whatever reason, that's difficult, I would think. Um, how can people help? Is it cash? Is it food and snacks? Is it clothing? How do you think we can help these folks now and then just kind of always?
Well, to tell you the truth, we have some great nonprofit organizations that I'm familiar with in the state who really lead on homeless prevention. Particularly, there's an organization called the Partnership for Strong Communities that's very focused on how do we have more affordable housing and how do we have opportunities for people when they're homeless to get what's called rapid rehousing, which is to offer them a subsidized housing so they can have that while they're trying to get back on their feet. So the Partnership for Strong Communities, the Coalition to End Homelessness, and then just really supporting, I would say, some of the basic needs in our community. So supporting right now, especially as well, our food pantries. This morning, I actually left the house and went to Food Share, which
Awesome.
is
Yeah.
our really incredible resource in our area that is really feeding all of our community right now. And they still need volunteers right now in order to distribute food. And those are the type of basic needs that are essential for people that
Yeah.
are, again, kind of in a range of scenarios as to why they might be homeless. And I'd also say what's so essential about kind of having housing available for individuals is then they can often be in programs where there's more wraparound services, be it their mental health needs, be it their job needs, really trying to stabilize individuals. And that's what people can really get once they can connect with some of the nonprofits in our region.
That's really, really good. I've had an association with Food Share. I just know some of the folks there. I've done a little bit of work for them over there. Amazing work that they've done, and they've really growing. They're doing a fantastic job. So, yeah, Food Share, folks, is a great resource to look into and donate to, food or money or whatever, or even your time. They need people to distribute and package and stuff like that. So that's awesome. Shifting now to what this podcast is about is behind the
Yeah.
brand is we're not going to switch to your other brand yet. First, we're going to keep talking about your personal Kate
Okay.
brand.
Sure.
In this, we're going to keep that one for a little surprise because I don't know if everybody knows what you do on the other side of this. So,
Yeah.
how do you? So for you, it is. I mean, I talk to a lot of people. Either you run a business, you work for a business, and that brand isn't necessarily you. It's the company brand, but you running as as for a representative seat, you really are you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So. I like your website. I think it's very clean and
Oh,
crisp and
great.
nice. Colors are
Excellent.
very
Yeah.
cool. So, tell me about that. How did you come about kind of going that way? What's your ideal way of sort of getting your brand out there as you
Yeah.
yourself?
It's such a great question. You struggle with it, right? Just like if you have a business, you want anything to fully represent you. You want it to be authentic, not forced. And I think for in my life, I've often, again, worked for a lot of organizations where the issues have been front and center and it wasn't about me. And one of the things that I had to really think through as a candidate and as a brand, what were the values that I wanted to put front and center? And also, how did I want that showcased? And one of the things, if you go to my website at
Do
kateforct.com,
it, yeah.
you can see the logo, for instance. So the logo, it was really important to me, again, kind of centered in what I care about to support women business owners. And so the logo was actually created by Hartford Prince and the women at Hartford Prince, who I've known for many years. And we talked a lot about color. Color was very important to me. I wanted it to be fresh and bold. And I've actually, for a long while, been attracted to kind of the brighter green that's
Mm-hmm.
in that
I'm
logo.
with you,
It
yeah.
just really speaks to me. And gives a sense of energy, which I bring to everything I do. And we also really talked about centering and focusing on my first name, because when I meet people, I'm certainly not one of those people that is expecting people to call me by my full name or or have this formality to it. So we, in the logo, it's very clear. It's leading with Kate. That's actually my full name. It's not short for anything. So really leading with that and wanting to make sure that in the logo, it was also clear that I am a Democrat. That is a part of my identity. That is a part of who I am. And the race we're running, which is for state representative. But in regards to, what I'm trying to put forward as a candidate is really trying to make sure that, yes, kind of my values of equity and fairness and kind of compassion and collaboration come through and how I'm introducing myself and working with people. But I do want people to see in my brand that I'm not kind of business as usual, right? Like I'm really trying to bring my, fresh energy and new perspective to how I lead and how I can be a champion for our district. So it's kind of weighing those things as you work through. How can you present that about yourself?
Yeah, and I think it's nice. It's if I recall, it's a very nice crisp green, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful color. It's I have green in one of my logos, so yeah, totally a fan. So when you get up, what do you think about first? Well, so you're doing double duty, right? You got about you
I have
probably
a
think
job. Yeah, I have a
yeah,
job.
you have a
Exactly.
job, right? But this is very. It sounds like it's very passionate and very heartfelt
Yeah.
what you're doing now, because you really,
Yeah.
and your job is about helping people. So this is not new
It
to
is.
you. This is this is what you do for a living, is you help people for a
Yeah.
living. So I think this is very close to your heart. So when you get up in the morning, is it like, okay, what am I doing for my job? How do I get those people going, and or is it like, all right, what am I going to do for my campaign? Like, when is it really going to heat up? When
Good question on the timing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in our state, so the election for, again, all of the state reps, all of the state senators, all of our presidentials, it's a while off, right? It's November. But especially as a new candidate, as someone who hasn't run before, it was very important to me to get out early, which is why I announced so early in January, because I want to build as many relationships as possible and really have that time to do that. And from the standpoint of what I think about in the morning, yeah, there's no normal day, which is probably what I love about my life. There's no normal
Sure.
day, but I definitely am in a situation where I do have my full-time job still, which is as executive director of a nonprofit. And so really from a standpoint of kind of usually kind of 9 to 5, that's kind of sucking up my my time. And to your point, I'm thinking about my staff, especially right now, because
Absolutely.
we went remote as of Friday. I have a small and mighty team of 7, and we are navigating that together, and we're checking in on one another and really just trying to keep up the work that we're doing. So I'm definitely kind of in the work mode, really kind of in that 9 to 5 time frame. And then in the evenings, I'm definitely trying to catch up on campaigns. So
Yeah.
when we were in a mode of not being a public health crisis, that often meant going to evening events, right? So going to community events, really being able to connect with people and just learn a little bit more about what's going on and be present. And now that we are in this
Yep.
crisis, it means coming up with other ways of connecting.
Yep.
Quite honestly, the other night we had our first Zoom campaign meeting. And so we had an organizing meeting for a bunch of our volunteers. And we're coming up with ways we can connect with voters remotely, right? It's a whole new world.
Yeah, it is. And
And
I'm
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
no, please.
It was kind of, you just led right into my
Yeah,
next point is, social media. Social media has been in, the election for not all that long, only in a couple of election cycles maybe,
yeah.
where I think social media has really been utilized. As far as Twitter and stuff. I could be wrong, but it seems like it's only been a couple of election cycles. So how now that, I'm sure, did you have a plan before our health crisis to use social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter,
Yeah.
TikTok, so on and so forth? I'm sure you did, and are you planning on ramping that up now? That you can't go to, rallies and whatnot.
I know, I know. Actually, so we started our Facebook and Instagram and Twitter presence right away. Um, but it's different now because we certainly need to rely on it more. So one of the things that's happening is we may actually be doing digital ads earlier than we would have planned. Usually we wouldn't use money for that until later in the campaign. But because we are somewhat limited in regards to some of our outreach, we are definitely relying on our networks and people reaching out to their networks. And we're looking at sending letters, which will be exciting for people to send letters to people in the mail. But yes, right now on social, it's been a balance really of reporting a bit of what is going on, right? You want people to feel like you have the information that they might need about what's going on in this crisis, but also trying to balance that still with people getting to know me, people getting to know what's happening on the campaign. But from a follower standpoint, our follower growth would typically be based on, again, being out in the community more and doing more events. And that's why we're probably going to be using some digital advertising sooner than we anticipated.
Are you going to do any kind of print, that kind of stuff, and or have you?
Yeah.
What do you find is you get better results from? Is it the social media? Is it the print? Or is it about the
Yeah.
same? Do you have any stats on that?
Well, in any campaign, you will get the most outcomes from door knocking,
Oh,
always.
interesting.
And that's why it's a real bummer. So I actually had done 150 doors before we ended door knocking last week. And until we can start that up again, it means I'm making phone calls instead, which are people are less likely to answer their phone,
Sure.
certainly, than answer their door. So in any campaign, you're going to get the best result through door knocking from that face-to-face interaction. And then people really do rely on mail still for campaigns. We will be doing several mail pieces as we go through the campaign. And that's essential because you might not, again, get someone face to face at the door or get them on the phone. And then usually social media is often used, again, for more of your supporters who know who you are, to feel constantly up to date. And then again, to kind of draw people in who might be seeing some of those digital ads to learn more. But in regards to getting people to really vote for you, that really comes down to often door knocking.
That's
Is
that's
the best
that
best
is
route
that's
still
I,
for
I guess if you
campaigning.
think about it, it totally makes sense. The door knocking,
Yeah,
because it's face to
yeah,
face. It's that introduction, because it is you're voting for a person. So
yes,
it's hard to know that person a little bit easier through video, but you can't learn that about that person really, seeing a picture or reading some text. So, and that's unfortunate. That I wonder.
yeah.
We got some time yet, but again, this is such an unknown time we're in. We have no idea when we're going to be able to go out and knock on doors again, which is it's going to be interesting coming up. So a lot of thinking for you to do, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I want to switch a little bit to
Yeah.
Connecticut Women's Education and Legal Fund. Did I get
Yes,
that right?
you did.
Cool. So before we go any further, just tell me what that is. Let's hear it, because we are running a little bit short. So I don't want to rush you through this, but I definitely want to hit on this organization that you're
Yeah.
executive director of. So why don't you just give us a lowdown about what this is?
Sure. So we're 46 years young.
Wow.
We advocate for and empower women and girls across the state, especially those who are underserved and marginalized. And we really do that in three ways. One is we provide completely free services for women, especially who can't afford legal representation. So people can call, email us still now, even though we're remote, for legal guidance. We also advocate significantly at the Capitol on women's economic security issues. We were successful last year in passing paid family medical leave, but we lead on a lot of issues around childcare, equal pay, housing issues for women. And then thirdly, we run a range of programs to really kind of close the gaps for women in the workplace.
How do you get the word out about you?
Ah, so hard.
Yeah.
I think like any small nonprofit, you're honestly, I wish, right, every single one of us had a budget where we could make lovely PSAs
Hmm.
and get them out. And honestly, we have to rely on number one, other organizations in the community knowing about us and referring people to us and encouraging people to connect with us. We also have to rely a lot of word of mouth. But then we obviously do use our communication mechanisms too. I mean, we have social media that we use to continue to try to build our base. And then we use all of our staff and volunteers and board members to make as many introductions as possible, as you can imagine.
Awesome.
So going to events and just trying to get more people activated with us. One of the biggest ways for us in the last few years was, there has been, kind of greater activism, you could
Hmm.
say, since the 2016 election, and people have been looking for ways to get involved. So that might be going to an event and having a simple sign up so we get people to join our email list, right? And it's like the starting place for just
Yeah.
getting people more activated
Yeah.
with us.
How many staff do you have uh, in the organization?
Yeah, there's just 7 of us.
There's 7. Okay. And
Yeah.
40. So how long have you been executive director?
Over 4 years, a little
Oh,
over 4 years.
that's very cool. So,
Yeah.
were you with the organization before that, or
I
no?
wasn't.
You weren't.
I
Okay.
wasn't.
And
Yeah.
what drew you to Connecticut Women's Education Legal Fund? Sort of, what was I don't know if they reached out to you or you contacted them, but why was that such a good move for you? Do you think does it fit your personality well?
Well, actually, what happened was I was moving home to Connecticut and I actually had my own nonprofit consulting firm that I had started. So had started this small business so I could move home to Connecticut and had a few clients in DC and then was building my Connecticut network again. And I had known the executive director at the organization previously from when I grew up here and started my career here. And she was leaving and she'd been there 16 years. So the board actually hired me as the interim executive
Oh,
director.
interesting.
And I had no plans, quite honestly, of
Okay.
being the full time executive director, the permanent. But it was after being there a few months that I realized that I probably could be a good fit for
Hmm.
what was needed, honestly, because the org was really ready for change. And that's something that, I love being a part of organizations and kind of communities that are open to change and really, open to having someone kind of be a part of what that looks like for them. And that was a great fit. And so I went through the search process and was hired as the permanent one again a little over 4 years ago.
What kind of change have you brought?
Yeah, great question.
Yeah.
So the big thing for the organization was we really kind of refocused our mission. We created values for the organization and we created a 2030 vision for the organization so that we were really being clear about how are we going to advance gender equity across the whole state for women and girls. One of the things that the organization had kind of struggled with, and this is the case for many organizations due to funding, is we were often kind of more focused in Hartford and New Haven rather than statewide. And so we really created a plan of how we were going to become more statewide in our vision. And we really also were focused on how do we stay true to these particular strategies and kind of not get off course. Because a mission so broad as gender equity, you could say you could do anything in
Hmm.
some ways. So it's really, we had to let go of some projects and really try to focus on what were we good at. And that meant us really kind of charting this vision, being able to create more of a statewide focus. So now we're in Fairfield County more, we're in Eastern
Oh,
Connecticut
that's great.
more. We
Yeah.
have funding now even from Northwest Connecticut. And that's really essential for us being this kind of statewide voice for women and girls.
What kind of do you have any partners or sponsors or things like that? What kind of partners do you have, and how do they help? And if somebody wanted to be a partner,
Yeah.
what would be good for that fit?
Well, we have, I mean, all sorts of partners. Quite honestly, first and foremost, we are a nonprofit, so we only exist because of supporters. So, from a financial perspective, we're only here for 46 years because we've had donors for that length of time who believe in our mission and our cause. But partners wise, they kind of fit into kind of three buckets. One is our government partners, right? So for instance, we have a partnership with the State Department of Education, particularly around trying to get more girls and women into STEM, for instance, right? Other partners or other nonprofit partners, right? So we lead something that's called the Connecticut Collective for Women and Girls.
Yep.
And that is a statewide network of women and girls serving organizations. And those are all of our partners in some way that we can really work together. And then third, we definitely have corporate partners. Those are corporations and businesses who want to support us in different ways. And sometimes that is with volunteers, sometimes that is with a financial contribution. And that's really dependent on what that kind of partnership could look like.
That's great. I think, to be honest with you, I haven't heard of your organization until I met you. So I hope that's okay, but I haven't.
Yeah, no, you're
I
not
guess
alone.
We don't travel in the same circles maybe, so that's okay.
Yeah.
I do want to invite you to, do you do any sort of networking, chamber events, those kind of things for your organization here? Do you do any of that kind of stuff? Are you members of any of those kind of business groups or what have you?
Yeah, so we've primarily been our business relationships were primarily kind of this business network that grew out of our work on paid leave around the state. So those are kind of the business connections we have. It's actually why I know Hartford Print so well, because they were really involved in that effort. But it's a great point. We haven't been as embedded in the different chambers or Metro Hartford Alliance as much as some of the other community groups around the state.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just as far as just doing an online presence and just carrying that over, as you said, like door knocking, it's almost the same thing, is to go out and represent yourself in person as well. Although, what kind of, again, same thing, social, do you have a presence on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook and so on and so forth?
We do. And I think to your point, it's always from the standpoint of identity, what are you trying to show?
Yeah.
And, for instance, yesterday I had to go to the office for the first time since leaving just to check the mail. And I did a quick video that my development and communications person posted online, really just saying hello to our supporters,
Yeah.
right? So that they know we are still working, right? We're still
Yeah.
carrying out our mission, even though
Absolutely.
we're not in the office. And things like that on social, I think, especially now, are really critical.
I think, and honestly, I've had this conversation with a couple of people. I think when we come out of this, I think video is going to play a much bigger role, afterwards, even when we still can do face to face. I think there's still, at least for a little while, maybe there still may be some skepticism of getting together in large groups. Why do that? Let's just do, as for instance, what we're doing right here, with this Zoom conference kind of thing. So I think there's going to be a lot more of that type of thing. Whether it be networking meetings or addresses or town hall events and things like that. I think it's a must. I think people kind of just. And not everybody can always make it either for whatever reason.
Agreed.
So I think videos. This may be the stimulus to get more people used to using these types of programs and whatnot. So anyway, that's my
Great.
feeling. What's one last couple of things that on either side? Let's do one for each. So give me a plug for the Connecticut Women's Fund first. Why don't you give me something for those folks? How they can reach who you're really looking for, how they can reach out to you, and sort of if you have a mission statement in a one sentence, that would be cool too. I'd like to hear that.
Yeah, so for the Connecticut Women's Education and Legal Fund, anyone can go to CWEALF.org to join us. And I would say to take action for women and girls, the best way to do that is to sign up for email. So you get our email alerts. But if you are and want to show how you're a champion for women and girls, we are the place to be. That's what we do as a part of our work every day. And we want you to be a part of it.
That's awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And now for Kate, the candidate.
The candidate.
Yeah. Right. So let us know how we can reach out to you. Well, are you accepting emails or phone calls about
all the time?
Just of, hey, Kate, I want you to fix this. And
Yeah.
Since I asked that question, what is the biggest problem or two problems or
Hmm.
issues that people
Yeah.
are talking to you about it that they want fixed?
Well, it's again, it's a great question because especially when I was door knocking, you get all types of things. You get things which I've actually followed up on and found out for people like, when is my sidewalk going to get fixed? I've emailed it and you realize, okay, I'm going to email this person in town, and you follow up, and you figure out how to find out that information for people. But ultimately, I think there's kind of two big things I've heard from people as I've talked to them. One is, which I think is very exciting, especially even in talking to you and a lot of people in our district, is what is the vision that we can see for our community, especially in the Elmwood New Park area, and how can we really work together to bring that to fruition? I think that there's a lot of people who want to invest in that in some way, and there hasn't really been a way to come together about that quite yet. And I think that that's something I'm really hearing from people about. And then, secondly, the other thing that I think I hear a lot about is just how much people certainly love living here, and have gotten so much out of the education system, but they also know that their neighbors and families are struggling with healthcare costs or childcare costs. And so how can we really do more to address some of those inequalities for our families, especially in our district? Because across our town, but also in our district, right? We have such diversity, even from socioeconomic levels, that comes through for people. So people really bring up, how can we kind of take care of our neighbors, those sorts of issues.
Yeah, no, I think both things are very important. I think being able to take care of our neighbors is really important, because you could fix all the sidewalks you want, but if the neighbors
Yeah.
are struggling, then nobody's going to be walking down those sidewalks. So I think that's really, really important. How can people get a hold of you? Call you,
Yeah.
email?
So best way to do it, if you go to my website, kate4ct.com, there's options there to email me and join our social. And I certainly welcome people, not just to follow what we're up to, but we certainly are looking for volunteers, even if they
Awesome.
are remote at this time. So people can contact us about getting involved that way. And if there's some, questions or concerns you have, I definitely want to hear them. I know we're in this
Great.
moment of a focus on our own health, but there are other things that might matter to you that I'd love to hear about.
Awesome. Kate, I'm going to invite you back on the show when
Oh,
this all clears, so we can
okay.
actually sit down and have a proper conversation, if you're up to it.
Yeah,
Because I do
definitely.
have to wrap it up, and it's short and sweet, but I really do want to spend some more time with you, and a face to face, and we'll do it the real way. This has been a lot of fun, but I really want to have you back in, and we can kind of talk about these issues in a little bit greater detail, maybe in a couple of months or so. It would, if
Great.
you're up for that, that'd be awesome. So thank you so much for joining me. Everybody, thanks for watching. Again, this has been, I believe this is our 9th episode. You made it to the 9th episode, which is very
Awesome.
cool. Yeah, so Behind the Brand. Kate, again, thank you very much. And yeah, stay healthy.
Thanks. You too.
Thanks.